Today we're going to talk about our experience with UW Farm. This is a presentation by Claire, Madison, Emily, and Jolie. First, we're going to go into our table of contents. Today we're going to first talk about the creation of the UW Farm by referencing a video from Perry Ackworth, the UW Farm manager, as she speaks about the formation of the UW Farm. Then we'll go on to talking about Emily's experience at the farm and her experience with the regenerative nature of the farm and the commercialization of agriculture. Then we'll move on to Jolie's experience with notes on regenerative agricultural practices witnessed at the farm and the growing biodiversity of the farm. Then we'll move on to talking about the sustainable farm practices, where Claire will expand on the sustainable farm practices we encountered at the UW Farm. Finally, we're going to connect this all to our class concepts, and Madison will talk about how our experience at the UW Farm has informed our comprehension of class concepts. First, we're going to talk about the creation of the farm. Here, we will hear from the UW Farm manager, Perry Ackworth, about how the UW farmland transitioned from indigenous land that was partially underwater to exposed marshland to a city dump and finally to healed land used for the UW farm.
There's a history to this site at the Center for Urban Horticulture. If you go back in time, the glacier carved out the Puget Sound region, which is where we are here in the Seattle area. The first human inhabitants here were Coast Salish peoples. And right near where the UW farm is, to the north, there were approximately 5 longhouses here. And it was an established settlement for native peoples. The area where the farm is was partly underwater and was a vibrant part of harvests and foraging and catching fish. Shortly after the turn of the century, in 1916, Lake Washington, which is just to the south border of the farm, was re-engineered. And there was a cut put through the north side of Lake Washington. It's called the Montlake Cut. And that was in the summer of 1916. In the fall of 1916, the Ballard Locks, or Hiram Chittenden Locks, with the Army Corps of Engineers was completed. And the combination of the Montlake Cut and the locks lowered the lake by 8.8 or approximately 9 feet. The lowering of the lake led to an exposure of all this marshland. What that meant is it was an undervalued sort of ecosystem, a wetlands. And in the 1920s, the city of Seattle had a dump here. It's called the Montlake Dump. It's also called the Ravenna Dump. And it started on the east side of the UW farm. The University of Washington took over ownership of that city dump. And over the next 20, 30 years, in more recent history, has spent a lot of time and effort remediating or healing the land. In 2012, students learned that the original farm site over at the Botany Greenhouse, that area was going to be, the buildings were going to be demolished, and they were going to lose the original farm site, which was quite small but really vibrant. They appealed to the university and said, hey, we want the farm to survive. We're looking for another piece of property. And eventually, through a lot of effort and a couple of appeals, the university said, well, there's this property over here. It used to be a landfill. Would you like it?
I think the coolest thing about the UW farm is that it's really an example of a regenerative cycle in of itself. The land has gone from being a home and source of production for indigenous families to being a local dump and back to being a place that provides for people. Many of the farming methods, too, the farm volunteers use are similar mini examples of the circle of life. It's really just a constant balance. Things die so that other things can live, and it wouldn't be possible to maintain the farm without death. One of the things I've learned volunteering is that death isn't something volunteers worry about too much. It's really just something that happens. It can be sad when crops don't survive a frost or when there isn't enough rain or sunlight for things to grow properly, but it's only sad for yield purposes. There's very little anthropomorphic emotion about it. Sometimes it's even a good thing when things die. Certain crops and food is composted to make better, more nourishing soil, and this soil is then used to help other things live. Farming isn't just sowing and reaping over and over and over again. It's so much more than that. Everything is just really a small step in a much larger process.
The first thing I learned at the UW farm was what regenerative agriculture was. It describes a farming and grazing practice that reverses climate change by building soil organic matter and restoring degraded soil biodiversity. We participated in regenerative agriculture in a series of ways, including rotating crops plots every season, or helping doing that during the autumn quarter. So we pulled out tomato plants, and then we replanted in the same plot a series of winter garlic that would grow throughout the winter season. We also helped by weeding and pulling out several plants, including a series of collard greens. And we also watched one of our leaders burn specific weeds with a fire system. We also helped with increasing the soil and rebuilding the organic matter by planting cover crop. And by assisting that, we used a combination of fish and bone meal to help water the plant. This helped affect the future generation of the Anthropocene by 1, the rotating crops helped build the soil, and so did the cover crop. 2, that burning system was a no-smoke system so that it wouldn't impact the carbon emissions. And then 3, we would also look through seed catalogs towards the end of our UW farm volunteering sessions that would encourage the farm to grow more diverse seeds and plants and just increase the biodiversity of the farm.
Modern farming is honestly such a great allegory for the Anthropocene. Humanity really got off the ground with the agricultural revolution, and if you analyze the difference between farming thousands of years ago and farming today, you can really see what we've become as a society. Agriculture was originally just a small crop rotation, much like what the UW farm is capable of. You grew enough to feed your own family, maybe sell a few things if you were lucky. Now, the agricultural sector is massive, commercialized, and nearly unsustainable. I think if we can look at problems in the Anthropocene like that and really reflect on how to get back to what we came from, the world would be a way better place.
Now I'm going to talk about UW Farm sustainable practices that we witnessed during our time at the farm. One of the things we witnessed for sustainable practices was flame weeding. This is used to protect soil and make it more nutrient rich. It's a tool for weed management where a pyro weeder burns propane and has an attached hood that concentrates heat into a very thin section, saving energy. It burns at a high enough temperature to be smokeless, and it does not burn weeds or nutrient-rich soil. It only heats up the water in the weeds until their cells burst. Weeds in this top inch of soil are then killed without causing harm to the soil. Subsequent retention of water and nutrients in soil helps crops to grow without the frequent need for irrigation. Next, we learned about how they rotate crop plots. This is used to improve soil health. It helps return nutrients to the soil sustainably. It interrupts pest and disease cycles, it improves soil health, and it increases the overall biodiversity of the soil. Next, we learned about cover cropping. This is used for soil regeneration in bare plots. Things like grasses, legumes, and forbs are planted in bare plots. It increases soil nutrients and rebuilds organic matter, avoids the use of harmful chemicals, it improves soil fertility, it raises the soil moisture holding capacity, it improves species biodiversity, it prevents soil erosion, it reduces the compaction of soil, and it stores carbon in roots, soil, and above ground stems, diminishing greenhouse gases in the air. Another thing we learned at the farm was rain barrels. These are used for sustainable cleaning. Gutters on the farm shed roof slant down, leading rainfall to drip into rain barrels. These rain barrels on either side of the farm shed collect rainwater. Stored rainwater is then used to sustainably clean tools and plants. It helps eliminate major water waste and ensures further water doesn't go to cleaning tools. Another thing we learned about was how they diversify seeds and plants at the UW farm. UW Farm looks through seed catalogs and encourages diverse seeds to be planted. This led them to the development of the Heritage Orchard to expand their food variety, and has led to 60 plus unique produce types at the UW farm. This helps build more resilient, nutrient-diverse soil. It helps provide more secure, stable habitats for wildlife, and plant and soil diversity means greater resilience to climate change. Finally, we learned about the vermicompost. This is used to compost sustainably. Worms can break down 20% of their body weight, allowing them to be effective composters while producing nutrient-rich feces. UW Farm developed an industrial-sized vermicompost facility in the vermiculture shed. It can house up to 100 pounds of worms and produce 100 pounds of compost weekly. Vermicompost increases soil nutrition, reduces waste, and reduces compost costs. Finally, we learned about drip irrigation. This is used to irrigate responsibly and minimize water waste. An irrigation box goes to a pipe, which goes to lines of drip tape irrigation. Drip tape has little uniform holes along it, and drip tape holes release water uniformly across the length of a bed when it reaches a certain pressure. It ensures there's little water waste. It prevents disease in plants, as drip tape only drips onto soil, not leaves, stems, or the fruit of plants. It reduces weed growth sustainably, and it can be reused after a crop season.
Lastly, I will be connecting to how this experience informed our comprehension of class concepts. Connecting our experience to class readings, the first reading I will be talking about is Death in the Ecological Process by Steve Peck. Modern society's deep separation from our agricultural systems plays a part in our current ecological illiteracy. It is necessary to acknowledge the death of organisms that play a greater part in our food-producing systems, and if we don't, we will distance ourselves from the ecological process. Death is a vital part to the cycle of life. At the farm, this process is acknowledged, and through our hands-on experience, we were able to have a greater connection to our food systems. We even got to take home food. Now, my message to the class reflects the same message in the reading. You don't have to go work on a farm to connect yourself to these processes, but think about the aspects of life and death before you eat the very thing that died to help to sustain your life. The next reading I will be talking about is The 8 Million Species We Don't Know by Edward Wilson. The most striking fact about the living environment is how little we know about it, Edward Wilson. Now, this extends further than the species, as our time on the farm didn't focus on that as much. The greater sentiment is that we need a better understanding of life on Earth. Education is vital to our understanding on how to best serve the environment, as climate change has become increasingly more apparent to our society. Our time at the UW farm allows us to gain educational experiences on how to serve the environment. For example, we better understand the nutrients the soil needs to support plant life, or the amount of water that is necessary for the plants to grow, yet not lead to water waste by using drip irrigation. Next, I will be connecting to our greater class concepts. First is terror management theory. Our suppression of death-related anxieties hurts our chances to better understand ecological processes, something that is vital and necessary to connect us to all living things. Our time at the farm allowed us to understand death in a different light, as it was a necessary part of life. Next is reducing waste. Our consumerism and consumption continues to hurt the environment. We were always offered food at the end of our shifts, and they would always say, "Only take it if you know you will eat it." This further emphasizes our role in the amount of food waste happening in our world, and the importance for us to reduce our waste and make deliberate choices to better serve our environment. At the farm, they also use a drip irrigation system to reduce water waste, as I had cited before. This leads us into our final thoughts and our concluding statement.
First off, thanks for tuning in, but our main takeaways are death is a vital part of our ecological system. We must acknowledge and confront this reality due to our connection to all living things. Working towards reducing waste will better inform our decisions and help curb our consumers' tendencies and overall consumption. UW Farm is an amazing place, and if you have the opportunity to volunteer, you definitely should.